So thank you very much to all of you. I think it was really inspiring presentation, and I think it was also extremely interesting to see how your different way of working are actually really connected, because you work with art as evidence. And usually the moderator in this situation is starting to ask the first question, but I also know that you would like to ask some question each other, and I think it's also a really nice occasion, because you have a lot of link among you, and also I think that actually was also your idea to be together on stage. So I think that I will give you really the pleasure to start this question. So who wants to start? If you don't want, of course, we open to the audience. What do you want?
Sort of have a question, actually.
I
have a question.
Okay.
So I often wonder how it is that you deal with the stress from all of these situations. And I wonder if, for example, when working with these things, that there are ways that you integrate, like, for example, a practice into your life in order to help you, or if you find your work to be a meditative process that helps you. Like I do yoga, for example, sometimes, and I find that that helps me to slow myself down when I think about revealing a top secret document, the likes of which might be the end of my life if someone takes it badly, or if they take it well, actually. And I wonder if you guys, much older and wiser than me, if you have anything that you would say to people who want to take a similar path, or if there's some way that you find to calm yourself to work on these things in a focused way. I figured that that would also be.
Something actually that we've all talked about, that Trevor, I mean, I think like once you sort of assess what the risks are, and you have to answer, okay, will I stop because of those risks? And if the answer is no, then you try to get on with your life and not think about them too much. I think that there's also, like, you know, the mind is a wonderful thing, and it protects you from those things you don't want to think about too much. And I also think that in the people that I film are always taking greater risks than I'm taking. So to dwell on my risks, it just seems it's disproportionate.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing that I would add to that is a culture of fear is a condition of possibility for these kinds of things, like the war on terror and the NSA spying and that sort of thing. And I think, and for me, I guess, when I get afraid and worried about it, I try to check myself and try to not reproduce that politics of fear, because I thought, well, if everybody stops doing something because they're afraid of it, then guess what the world is going to look like? It's going to look like whoever's creating the fear is going to run the show, and so I just think about it in this more abstract way, I guess. And also, paranoia, and that there's no methodology that suggests, right? That you can either decide not to do something or you decide to do something. There's no method that is suggested by being afraid of something.
Pre-paranoid, I believe.
And
is what it's called.
this is your word that you coined yesterday, pre-paranoid. You said, I'm not paranoid, I'm pre-paranoid.
Be prepared.
Actually, maybe I would step in the conversation, and I think that Jake said something really interesting while you were describing that actually power system always make mistakes, and you also describe us which kind of bug in the system we can discover and technically analyze. And I think also from your presentation, Laura, it's really clear that mistakes can also be done really in terms of politics, and also the bad decision that the governments often take. And I think also that often, at least my perspective is that from this kind of bug in the system, actually, there is also the answer in how to confront a system of powers. So my question would be, what did you actually learn from their mistakes that could be transferred as a strategy of responding to a certain politics of power abuse and mass surveillance? What could be actually the bug in the system that could be turned into a form of action?
Well, I mean, I think in my case, I've had an experience where I've been stopped at the border a number of times, and it's just made me really good at, sort of operational security issues and encryption. So their mistake to target a journalist over years made me then, able to work with material and, in a sense, safely or work on the story. So it's kind of an unintended consequence.
Yeah, I found that one of the big mistakes is, especially in the case of the US government, like Laura, I've also been stopped countless numbers of times and harassed. What I found is that actually, as Trevor has also said, thinking about the fear, right? Part of the motivation of the state in some cases when harassing is to induce a kind of fear. But really you can check the fear. So, for example, if they were going to arrest you, they're agents of the state. They will have no mercy. If they can arrest you, they will arrest you. The only thing preventing them from doing that is probably, in some cases, their commanding officer. In some cases, it's not even the law. It's certainly not their kindness. It's rarely the case that they are merciful. And a useful thing about this is that it allows you to develop strategies for coping with that. So for me, I found that the mistake was that they acted as if they would be violent or as if they would derive pleasure from my suffering. And I realized that they actually weren't going to cross this line too much. And if they did, that it would actually probably be sort of interesting, more than the boring detentions. And I tried to use humor at all times. So I would stuff like canned snakes with glitter on them into my luggage, or a greasy dildo or something like this, so that when they would be searching through my luggage, it would change the frame of reference where they were thinking about it in terms of terrorism. Greasy dildo is an old favorite with the US government. Usually they give it to the rest of the world. Sometimes we can give it back. But what I found is that the mistake was that they pretended that they were all powerful and that humor itself could crack that. And then I no longer believe that. But another, I think, clear example of a mistake that the state has made is in doing these things in unjust ways, it actually creates, as Laura says, people who adapt to their tactics and their strategies, who are more suited than they were previously to be able not only to resist, but to build alternative structures and systems, and to help other people in solidarity to change that. And that's clear. With what Snowden has shown the world, we can build technological systems that reduce the ability for surveillance to work on a mass scale. So that's something that one of the big mistakes was that they believed that secrecy would be the sort of underpinning of that, and that learning the truth means that we can resist it and to change it.
Very well put. I'm not going to add to that.
Okay. You don't want to add? No. Trevor?
No.
Okay. So I say, at this point, I think I would then open to the audience. If there are any questions. Cannot see so well.
Surely.
So I think, please, if you have questions, go to the microphone. Okay, there is.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for your presentations. My name is Derek Scally. I'm afraid I am a journalist, but I have a personal interest in this. And you've all been talking about making us see this in new ways, seeing the reality we are in now in a new way. Do you ever in your work doubt, it's not about seeing, we're actually stuck in looking. People are looking, but they're not seeing. Do you ever have moments of doubt that maybe people just don't want to see, they'll just keep looking rather than seeing? And if people want to look and not see, how do we bring them into seeing and not looking? I hope I'm not being too complicated. My concern is that the apathy, people have looked and looked and looked, and they look at Guantanamo, they look at the Spiegel reports. What if they keep looking rather than seeing and then acting? Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a very serious problem, which is this notion that because people don't, there's a serious problem that I see, especially with journalism, but in general, this notion that people don't care because they don't take action. And I wonder what that would look like. For example, if you were to ask people in the audience how they feel about the notion of feminism, the radical notion that women are people too, it would be really difficult actually on a day-to-day basis to look at someone, examine their life, and to determine as an external person that they feel that way. Like maybe you could determine that because you're judging it and you're looking for that and there's a selection bias. But with surveillance, with the issues of state surveillance, with issues of Guantanamo Bay. I care deeply about that. My family, for example, put a huge fear of the Holocaust into me when I was growing up. It was quite a problem, actually, that I had an interest in the German language. Really like a lot of fear, an unreasonable amount of fear, in fact. But what am I supposed to do about Guantanamo Bay? What is the action that I can take that changes Guantanamo Bay? What agency do I really have? And so I think we have to be very careful about the fact that people are interested in learning more about it, but they don't know what to do. And that is not a reason to suggest that they do not care. And it's certainly not a reason to suggest, for example, that we are only looking. In some cases, I think it's quite clear that there is no action we can take when we do not have democratic representation about some of these issues, or when these issues exist outside of the systems, as Guantanamo Bay does, as an example. The NSA spying is much the same. I have never once voted on the NSA spying issues in my entire life, and certainly no German has. So it seems like it's very important to consider that fact when we talk about apathy, because in fact most people here I think would love to put a lot of energy into something, but we don't know what that something is yet. We need to come up with some discussions about what that is and to experiment with things. But I look around and I see people who have written, who have done great films, they've made amazing pictures. And those people are in fact motivated exactly by this, and it degrades their existence and their work when we suggest that everyone is merely apathetic. Right? There are people here that they work day in and day out on those things. And it's actually up to us to recognize that work and how it fits into those pictures. And that can be very difficult.
There is a question?
Yeah, I would have a question. You talked about surveillance or being searched at airports. Since you've been living in Germany or even visiting here, have you ever experienced something like that, or situations that were curious around your apartments or something like that? Thank you.
I can speak. I mean, I've had no issues traveling. I actually just recently traveled and I've never been questioned or anything. And I have a work visa. I had no problems obtaining that. So I'm actually really thankful. I mean, I'm working here. I mean, I moved here before I was contacted by Snowden because of the sort of border harassment stuff, and because I was editing a film, I didn't feel comfortable editing it in the United States. And it has felt like a safe place to work, and I haven't noticed anything suspicious. But you know, I assume there are people paying attention.
I've experienced some things in European airports, always at the request of the U.S. government, although it has not yet happened in Germany. I've also happened to, just through sheer luck, had the opportunity to see the German customs computer for my passport. And I didn't have any strange markings on it, which I was very pleased about. But I have been followed from the jetway to customs on multiple occasions by people that I think were probably BKA or BND, although I assume it's more BKA than anybody else. And I've had people outside my apartment, as well as people that claimed to have keys to my apartment because the rental agency had allegedly given it to them and they wanted to rent the apartment. And a few other weird things like that. And usually I've either caught the people or I've noticed them. I've taken photographs, but I haven't published them. I sort of don't want to show all of my cards there, but I want them to know that I can fuck them over as hard as I want to when I choose to. So I think that Germany is not exempt from these things, but I think that the German public has done something that I've never experienced in the United States, which is that they tend to, almost every German that I meet and have a serious conversation with, tends to really understand basically multiple dictatorships existing in Germany and what that means and the double consciousness. And what I've experienced is more solidarity from regular German people I talk to than anywhere, even in the United States with my circle of friends. And so it's important when we talk about that kind of harassment taking place, or maybe not taking place, I think the term is Zersetzung, it's important to talk about the corollary there, which is the amount of solidarity and mutual aid and support that is found every day in Berlin. And in Berlin is a really magical place for that. And there are people in this audience here who have offered basically for me to come and live with them with no strings attached, merely on the thought that they would be able to help. And that is something I have not experienced elsewhere, and I think it's worth giving credit to those people for that, although I won't name them since that would potentially bring them trouble. Oh, it's Bruce Sterling, right? No, he's in the audience. So.
Another question?
Hello. As we all know, the artwork always exists in context, and today we are among like happy hippie people who have luxury of spending free evening in the Berlin conference, and you're bringing the context, and Guantanamo Bay wasn't happening so long ago, and it's ongoing process. But similar things has happened, say, in Soviet Union, and the context of Soviet Union is very blurry nowadays. And the works like yours were created back then, and nowadays they are like wildly mistreated. Things like, particularly say like work like Laura's would be raising a lot of hard feelings, or just raising a lot of feelings. And by just giving a slightly different context, the work can be misused to create rage in people in the places where you don't want to see it. So aside from fear from, the moment when you create it, do you have the fears that the work that you create might bring actually unwanted consequences later in the future?
I mean, are you saying like you would wish that the Abu Ghraib photographs not be published?
Excuse me?
Are you saying that you think that the Abu Ghraib photographs shouldn't have been published?
Maybe it wasn't clear. What I'm saying is...
I'm kind of being a bit adversarial, but I mean, that is actually what it boils down to. I mean, we have the Abu Ghraib photographs, it's evidence of crimes. They were made public, and there probably were repercussions because they were so outrageous and people were so upset by them. I think that they should have been, and it's the right thing that they were made public and that the press made the right decision. And I think the real question is why are governments engaging in this kind of behavior? Why is there no accountability in response to it? And so that's more, which isn't to say I don't worry about consequences. I mean, I worry about consequences all the time, but I wouldn't withhold what I would consider to be truth or information that's clearly in the public interest out of that kind of fear. So that's...
Next.
I have lived in New York, and I was there during September 11. And what was probably equal shock was how my American friends and acquaintances responded with time, including, of course, media, the New York Times. I just could not believe what's happening.
Yeah.
And you being all Americans and doing this very important work, I would be interested in your experience and perception of your fellow Americans since September 11.
Well, I mean, I think the question is, in a sense, our government, rather than so much fellow Americans that we're, it's like a nightmare that you hope we wake up from someday. I mean, and that, that there's certain things. I mean, it's not like that the United States wasn't engaged in all kind of nefarious things before 9/11, but there is something uniquely, about sort of legalizing torture or having prisons, where people are detained without charge. I mean, it does seem like it's gone to a different level, and we can only do what we can in our own capacity to think that there'll be a phase where that ends. And I guess, Germany right now is an example of, a country that, has a nightmarish past, and has gone someplace else with it, so.
But on the other hand, I think one thing that has been happening more recently is like there's glimpses of hope, perhaps in the sense in some of the work that you've done. You're seeing like very strong majorities of Americans are like, stop this. Nobody wants this, and maybe that wouldn't have been the case like in 2002.
Yeah, I mean,
or
I
something
think
like
actually I should say that we should blame the government. We should also blame our press, the U.S. press, for how it responded to the invasion of Iraq. I mean, all these things that we now know and look back on and know that they failed us in terms of informing the public.
I think that question actually really upsets me when I think about it. Mostly because while I do agree with the both of you, I think it runs much deeper. I mean, I think I'm probably a bit younger than most of the people that experienced 9/11 as adults that are part of the US government and part of the press now. I remember waking up when this occurred, and I had actually gone to a military recruiting center. This is a really weird thing that almost no one knows about me. And I was about to become a victim of the poverty draft. And I didn't see any future other than potentially trying to get the military, for example, to pay for me to have a college education. And then a couple days later, September 11th happened. And I sort of just sat and talked with people, and I listened, and I realized what a fucking bad idea it would be to be a part of the military-industrial complex. I was young. I did not yet have an education, I suppose. I learned quickly, and one of the things that most struck me around the time that we illegally assassinated Osama bin Laden was the culture shift. So when September 11th occurred, people were really upset. They were crying, literally people crying in the streets like you have never seen in the United States in my lifetime. And when we killed Osama bin Laden, rather than giving him a trial, we gave Eichmann a trial. That guy is a million times worse than Osama bin Laden, and a million times more accomplished, actually, if you could call it an accomplishment. And we have a lot of closure, actually, due to Hannah Arendt writing about that, which we will never have with Osama bin Laden. And when I pointed this out to people at the University of Washington, where I worked as a research scientist when we assassinated him, people spit in my face for daring to believe that we should give him a trial. And they went through the process of dehumanizing Osama bin Laden, but also everyone in the United States, by suggesting that there were basically two classes of human beings, right? The sort of regular people that deserve that kind of process, and then everyone else. And that, I think, is the worst possible outcome. And I don't see that turning around at all in the United States. And in fact, you see it reflected everywhere in American society. In the NSA scandal, it's no different. You see that when they talk about spying on Americans versus spying on you guys as Europeans. And that fundamentally is a kind of fascist ideology which is not going to be put down easily. It's something that takes a lot of work and a lot of soul searching. And America doesn't have a framework for that kind of soul searching. And I have absolutely no hope of that changing, actually. Which is very sad, but somehow it has to change, but probably just by my entire generation growing old and dying. And I don't see anything changing that. But I wasn't affected by it in the same way. I was sad to learn that the guy wouldn't get a trial. Not because I didn't think he didn't do it or something like that, or didn't have some involvement or some culpability, but I viewed it in a totally different way, which was about where we as a people were, not about him. And that, I think, has nothing to do with the government, it has nothing to do with the press, and it has to do with the shitty little fascist inside of every person that many Americans refuse to suppress.
So I would say we can conclude with the last two questions, since they have been waiting, standing long time. So I would go with you on the right. And please, if you can keep it a bit short, because...
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I had like the idea of the question, like how to solve this, and then while I was listening to you, came to the idea that it's maybe a bad question because you cannot answer it. But maybe you can still try to find something, hopefully, to end this day, which I'm totally depressed although I'm always depressed, but regarding the NSA thing, I just wanted to ask you if you could, all three of you, if you can just give us a glimpse of hope that there is anything we can look for in this evening and have like, I want to drink something later and say, hey, there's hope. And not Obama, please.
No. I mean, I would say, there is a lot of hope in that we've seen, that single individuals who take risks and change the world.
Hope dies last, but it still dies. I mean, if you want to look for some hope in the world, I like to think of it this way. My last name is extremely Jewish. It's like Jewy McJewson, basically. It's so Jewish, right? It's pretty up there. And I'm in Berlin, and I'm a free man, and I'm not marked in any way by your government. And I think that there's a lot of hope, actually, when I look at Germany, and in the sense that I am a free person here. That's an unthinkable thing 75 years ago. And I think that I don't know how that came to be, but I know that it can be done. And I don't think that it's actually as bad as it has been in the 20th century. Some of these problems, especially surveillance, can be solved with strong cryptography, but not in isolation. There are political and technological solutions that have to work together. But hope, I think, is the wrong way to go about it. I think hope is useful, but as I just jokingly said to that Russian quote, hope dies last, but it still dies. I think what we need is action. And one of the concrete things that we can do in terms of action would be, for example, if Germany were to give Edward Snowden political asylum. And on a technical level, if you wish to, you can use strong cryptography, right? There's a war on your privacy, and every time you use encryption, you're winning it, to paraphrase Bill Hicks. He was talking about the war on drugs, and he said, every time you're high, you're winning it. But that's something which you can do today with free software. Not get high, but I'm sure there actually is a free software program for that. That's exactly right. There's a plugin for that. But that's, if you feel depressed about it, that's actually a good sign, right? I mean, here's why it's a good sign. You still feel. It's going to get so much worse. At some point, you're going to think, gosh, I remember when I could feel those things. And then when you get there, you're about a quarter of the way in. Welcome.
So, thanks.
Hello. Okay, mic's on. First of all, just as a young American here tonight, I feel very lucky to be here, and I actually am very hopeful, even if it's out of fashion. But this question is directed towards Trevor, and I was just curious if you've ever imagined or fantasized masses of people participating in your art practices and exposing the weaknesses and mistakes of covert actions. And I'm not sure if it's something you've thought about, but it was something I thought about.
I think masses of people do participate in trying to undo these things. I mean, in my own work, I'm constantly working with people from, human rights organizations and journalists and other artists and activists, and there's multitudes of people who are trying to both understand and shut down some of these programs and infrastructures that can be downright evil. So I actually think that there are multitudes of people trying to shut these down. And
so maybe I'll be a little more specific. If it became more of a civilian activity instead of something reserved for, maybe it is a civilian activity that I'm just not aware of, but it seems kind of maybe not an everyday. I'm just wondering.
I think that it is much more than maybe you think. There's a lot of people all over the world that are doing work to try to expose these programs and try to rein them in or shut them down. There's no reason why 1,000 people would work on one of my art projects, but my art project is the things that I do are just one thing among, a world of people that are doing similar kinds of things and who, it all adds up to something.
Thanks a lot, and I think I would conclude here. Really thank you for being with us, and I think your presentation really helped us to see the daily life with different eyes, and I also would reconnect and announce that, of course, the conference will go on from tomorrow, and also on Sunday we will have a panel really related with whistleblowing and moderated by Diane Barreto with William Binney, Annie Machon, and Alex O'Brien. So I thank you again, and see you in the next event.